The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds at Fort as Captain Sarah adjusted her uniform for what she thought would be another routine intelligence briefing. At 28, she had already established herself as one of the Army's most capable intelligence officers, with a sharp mind for analysis and an uncanny ability to piece together fragments of information that others missed. Her colleagues respected her tactical assessments, and her superiors valued her meticulous reports that had prevented countless ambushes and saved lives across 3 deployments. Sarah had always been different from her peers. Where other intelligence officers spent their time hunched over computers analyzing satellite imagery and intercepted communications, she craved fieldwork. She wanted to see the terrain herself, to understand the human factors that no amount of digital intelligence could capture. Her requests for forward deployment had been consistently, with her commanding officers insisting that her analytical skills were too valuable to risk in the field. That morning started like any other. Sarah arrived at the intelligence center before dawn, her coffee still steaming as she reviewed overnight reports from various units deployed across the region. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in their familiar harsh glow. She had learned to read between the lines of these reports, understanding that what soldiers didn't say was often more important than what they did. A pattern had been emerging over the past several weeks that troubled her deeply. Enemy snipers were becoming increasingly effective against American patrols. The reports spoke of precision shots that eliminated key personnel with surgical accuracy. Communications specialists, medics, and squad leaders were being targeted with disturbing consistency. Traditional counter-sniper tactics weren't working, and the enemy seemed to anticipate every move the conventional forces made. Sarah had been tasked with developing a comprehensive assessment of the threat, but she knew that her analysis from behind a desk could only go so far. The briefing room was already crowded when Sarah entered with her laptop and stack of classified folders. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, the battalion commander, stood at the front of the room studying a large map of the area of operations. His weathered face showed the strain of recent losses, and Sarah could see the weight of command in the set of his shoulders. Around the table sat the usual collection of staff officers, each representing different aspects of the military machine that kept their forces operating. "Captain, what do you have for us?" Martinez asked without looking up from the map. Sarah connected her laptop to the projection system and pulled up her analysis. The screen filled with overlapping circles indicating sniper attacks, each one color-coded by date and effectiveness. The pattern was undeniable, and the room fell silent as the implications became clear. "Sir, we're not dealing with random opportunistic shooters," Sarah began, her voice carrying the confidence that came from thorough preparation. "This is a coordinated campaign by highly trained marksmen who understand our tactics, our equipment, and our movement patterns. They're not just taking targets of opportunity. They're conducting reconnaissance, learning our routines, and exploiting our predictable behaviors." She clicked to the next slide, which showed the geographic distribution of attacks. "Notice how the incidents cluster around key terrain features that provide both excellent fields of fire and multiple escape routes. These positions require extensive knowledge of the local area, suggesting either local recruitment or prolonged observation periods." Major, the operations officer, leaned forward. "What are you recommending, Captain?" Sarah had been preparing for this question, knowing it would come and knowing that her answer would likely be rejected. "Sir, I believe we need human intelligence gathering that goes beyond our current capabilities. We need someone who can think like these snipers, who can identify their likely positions and patterns before they strike." "We have scout snipers. What makes you think they're not doing their job?" The question stung, but Sarah had anticipated it. "With respect, sir, our snipers are trained to hunt targets, not to hunt other snipers specifically. This enemy is using tactics and techniques that require a different approach. They're employing psychological warfare, choosing targets that maximize impact on unit morale, and they're ghost-timing their movements to avoid our surveillance assets." Colonel Martinez finally looked up from his map. "What exactly are you proposing?" This was the moment Sarah had been building toward, the recommendation she knew would change everything. "I want to request cross-training with the Scout Sniper School. I believe my intelligence background, combined with advanced marksmanship training, could provide us with the analytical framework needed to counter this threat effectively." The room erupted in barely suppressed murmurs. The idea of an intelligence officer requesting sniper training was unprecedented, and Sarah could read the skepticism on every face around the table. She had expected this reaction, but it still stung to see her competence questioned so openly. "Captain, with all due respect, you're an intelligence officer, not an infantryman," said, his tone suggesting he thought the conversation was over. "Scout sniper training is among the most demanding in the military. The failure rate is astronomical even among infantry soldiers who've been preparing for years." Sarah had spent weeks preparing for this objection. "Sir, I understand the physical demands, but I believe my analytical background provides advantages that traditional infantry training doesn't. I can read terrain like a tactical situation. I understand enemy behavioral patterns, and I've spent years learning to identify the subtle indicators that most people miss." Lieutenant Colonel Martinez studied her for a long moment. Sarah could see him weighing her proposal against military convention, measuring her determination against the practical realities of modern warfare. She knew that her record spoke for itself, but she also understood that what she was asking for challenged fundamental assumptions about military specialties and capabilities. "The physical requirements alone would eliminate you in the first week," Major Stevens, the training officer, interjected. "Scout Sniper School isn't just about shooting. It's about surviving in hostile territory for weeks with minimal support, about physical endurance that pushes human limitations, about psychological resilience under conditions that break most soldiers." Sarah had been expecting this challenge as well. Over the past month, she had been quietly preparing, pushing her physical training beyond anything required for intelligence officers. She had been running before dawn, practicing marksmanship at the base range during her off hours, and studying advanced camouflage and concealment techniques. She knew she wasn't ready yet, but she also knew she had the determination to become ready. "I'm willing to undergo additional physical preparation before attending the school," she said. "I understand that I would need to meet the same standards as any other candidate, and I'm prepared to accept failure if I can't perform at the required level." The discussion continued for another 20 minutes, with various officers raising practical objections and Sarah responding with carefully prepared answers. She could see that some of them were beginning to take her seriously, recognizing that her request came from genuine tactical insight rather than mere ambition or glory-seeking. Finally, Colonel Martinez called for silence. "Captain, assuming for the moment that I were to approve this request, what makes you think you could succeed where others have failed? Scout sniper training has broken soldiers who were specifically selected and prepared for the program." This was the question Sarah had been hopping for, the one that would allow her to demonstrate her understanding of what she was truly asking for. "Sir, I've studied the psychological profiles of successful snipers extensively as part of my intelligence work. The most effective marksmen aren't necessarily the best shooters. They're the ones who can remain calm under extreme stress, who can process complex information quickly and accurately, and who can adapt their tactics based on changing conditions. These are skills I've been developing throughout my intelligence career." She paused, knowing that her next statement would either convince them or end the discussion entirely. "More importantly, sir, I understand the enemy we're facing because I've been studying them for months. I know their training background, their tactical preferences, and their psychological approach to warfare. I believe I can learn to think like them because I already understand how they think." The room fell silent as the officers considered her words. Sarah could feel the weight of their skepticism, but she could also sense a growing recognition that her proposal might have merit. She had done her homework, and her preparation was evident in every response she gave. Colonel Martinez stood and walked to the window, looking out at the training grounds where soldiers were conducting their morning exercises. Sarah watched him carefully, knowing that his decision would determine the entire trajectory of her military career. She had committed herself completely to this path, understanding that there would be no going back if she failed. "The enemy sniper threat is real," Martinez said finally, still looking out the window. "Our current tactics aren't working and we're losing good soldiers. If Captain believes she can develop new approaches to this problem, and if she's willing to undergo the training necessary to test her theories in the field, then I'm inclined to give her the opportunity." He turned back to face the room, his expression serious. "However, I want to be absolutely clear about the conditions. You'll receive no special treatment or consideration during training. You'll be held to the same standards as every other candidate, and failure will result in immediate return to your intelligence duties with no second chances." Sarah felt her heart racing, but she kept her expression neutral. Understood, sir. Additionally, you'll need to maintain your current intelligence duties until you're accepted into the program, which means your preparation will have to be completed on your own time. The training pipeline has a 6-month waiting list, which should give you adequate time to prepare physically. The reality of what she had just committed to began to sink in. 6 months of intensive preparation while maintaining her full-time intelligence duties, followed by what was widely regarded as one of the most demanding training programs in the military, with no guarantee of success, and the knowledge that failure would likely end her chances of ever working in the field. I understand the timeline, sir. Major looked up from his notes. Captain, I hope you understand that this isn't just about physical fitness and marksmanship. Scout Sniper School will test every aspect of your character. You'll be evaluated on stalking techniques that require you to move hundreds of meters across open ground without being detected. You'll be required to remain motionless for hours while maintaining observation on targets. The psychological pressure is designed to eliminate candidates who can't handle the isolation and stress of prolonged field operations. Sarah nodded, recognizing that was trying to help her understand what she was facing rather than simply discouraging her. I appreciate the warning, sir. I believe my intelligence background has prepared me for the psychological aspects, but I know the physical challenges will require significant preparation. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez returned to his position at the head of the table. Very well, Captain. I'll submit the request through proper channels. In the meantime, I expect you to continue your excellent work on the sniper threat analysis while beginning your personal preparation. I'll assign Sergeant First Class from our Scout Sniper section to assist with your training program. The mention of surprised Sarah. She knew him by reputation as one of the most respected Scout snipers in the battalion, a soldier who had successfully completed multiple deployments and had earned the respect of both his peers and his commanders. Having his guidance would be invaluable, but it also meant that her preparation would be observed and evaluated by someone who understood exactly what she was trying to achieve. Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you. As the meeting broke up and officers began filing out of the room, Sarah remained seated, organizing her materials and processing what had just happened. She had gotten approval for something that 6 months ago would have seemed impossible. Now the real work would begin. Major Stevens approached her as she was packing up her laptop. Captain, I hope you know what you're getting yourself into. I've seen a lot of motivated soldiers attempt Scout Sniper training, and motivation alone isn't enough. The attrition rate exists for good reasons. Sarah looked up at him, recognizing genuine concern rather than skepticism in his expression. I understand that, sir, but I also understand that conventional approaches to this sniper problem aren't working. If there's a chance that my background can contribute to a solution, I have to try. Stevens nodded slowly. Just remember that wanting something badly enough doesn't guarantee success. The program is designed to identify soldiers who can perform under the worst possible conditions, not soldiers who are simply determined to succeed. After he left, Sarah sat alone in the briefing room for several minutes, looking at the map that still showed the locations of recent sniper attacks. Each mark represented American casualties, soldiers who had died because the enemy was consistently one step ahead of American countertactics. She had spent months analyzing these incidents from the safety of an office, but now she would have the opportunity to take her analysis into the field where it could make a real difference. The magnitude of her commitment began to settle in as she finally gathered her materials and headed back to her office. She would need to completely restructure her life around the training requirements while maintaining her performance in her current duties. There would be early morning runs, late evening study sessions, weekend range time, and countless hours of physical conditioning that would push her body beyond anything it had experienced before. But as she looked once more at the tactical map, Sarah knew she had made the right choice. The enemy snipers were winning because they understood something about warfare that the conventional forces were missing. If she could learn to think like they thought while maintaining her analytical perspective, she might be able to develop the new approaches needed to save American lives. The walk back to her office took her past the base gym, where she could see soldiers working out in preparation for various training programs. Some were infantry soldiers preparing for Ranger School, others were support personnel maintaining their fitness requirements. Soon she would be among them, but her preparation would be focused on a goal that none of them could imagine. Sarah understood that she was embarking on a journey that would fundamentally change who she was as a soldier and as a person. The analytical skills that had defined her career would need to be supplemented by physical capabilities and tactical knowledge that she had never needed before. The safe, controlled environment of intelligence work would give way to the dangerous uncertainty of field operations, where her decisions would have immediate life-or-death consequences. As she settled back at her desk and opened the latest intelligence reports, the alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 in the morning, just as it had every day for the past 3 months. Sarah rolled out of bed immediately, having trained herself to eliminate the temptation to hit the snooze button. Every minute of preparation time was precious, and she couldn't afford to waste any of it on comfort or convenience. The pre-dawn darkness had become her closest companion, as she pushed her body through increasingly demanding training routines. Sergeant First Class had proven to be both an invaluable mentor and a demanding taskmaster. Their first meeting had been awkward, with the experienced scout sniper clearly skeptical about training an intelligence officer for his specialized field. Was a compact, weathered soldier in his early 30s who moved with the economical precision of someone who had spent years operating in hostile territory. His reputation for straight talk and uncompromising standards had initially intimidated Sarah, but she had quickly learned to appreciate his direct approach. "Ma'am, I'm going to tell you something that might save you a lot of pain and embarrassment," had said during their first training session. "Scout Sniper School isn't about proving you're tough or smart. It's about proving you can do a very specific job under very specific conditions. If you can't do that job, all the determination in the world won't help you." Sarah had nodded, understanding that he was establishing the framework for their relationship. There would be no special consideration for her rank or her intelligence background. She would be evaluated solely on her ability to meet the standards required of a scout sniper, and would push her exactly as hard as necessary to determine whether she could reach those standards. The physical training had been the most immediate challenge. Sarah had always maintained reasonable fitness levels for an intelligence officer, but the demands of scout sniper preparation were entirely different. Long-distance running, load-bearing exercises, and complex physical challenges that tested both strength and endurance became daily requirements. Had designed a program that systematically addressed every aspect of physical capability that would be tested during the actual school. Running had become Sarah's meditation time, the period each morning when she could process the mental challenges while building the cardiovascular base she would need. The base perimeter road had become as familiar to her as the intelligence center, with every hill and turn mapped in her memory. She had progressed from struggling through a 3-mile run to completing 8-mile runs with a weighted pack, building the foundation for the even more demanding requirements she would face at Scout Sniper School. Marksmanship training had revealed both Sarah's natural aptitude and the enormous amount she still needed to learn. Her initial range sessions had been humbling, demonstrating that casual familiarity with firearms was completely different from the precision shooting required of a military sniper. Every aspect of her shooting technique had required rebuilding from the ground up, starting with breathing techniques and progressing through trigger control, sight alignment, and range estimation. "Ma'am, forget everything you think you know about shooting," had told her during their second range session. "What you learned in basic training was designed to make you functional with a rifle at close range. What we're learning here is designed to make you deadly with a rifle at long range, and those are completely different skills." The precision required for long-range marksmanship had initially frustrated Sarah, who was accustomed to the immediate feedback and clear metrics of intelligence work. A shot that missed by 6 inches at 200 yards would translate to a complete miss at 800 yards, and the margin for error decreased with every additional yard of distance. Had patiently worked with her to develop the muscle memory and mental discipline necessary for consistent accuracy. "Shooting is 10% mechanical and 90% mental," he had explained while watching her struggle with a particularly challenging shot sequence. "Your body can learn to do the mechanical part automatically, but your mind has to stay calm and focused under conditions that naturally create stress and uncertainty." The mental aspects of sniper training had proven to be both Sarah's greatest strength and her most significant challenge. Her intelligence background provided advantages in areas like observation, pattern recognition, and situational analysis that impressed even. She could identify targets and assess tactical situations with a speed and accuracy that came from years of analyzing complex information under pressure. However, the transition from analyzing situations to taking direct action based on those analyses required a fundamental shift in mindset that didn't come naturally. Intelligence work involved careful deliberation and thorough documentation of decision-making processes. Sniper work often required immediate decisions based on incomplete information, with no opportunity for second-guessing or revision. "Ma'am, you think too much," had observed during a stalking exercise where Sarah had spent several minutes analyzing possible approach routes instead of simply selecting one and committing to it. In the field, perfect decisions made too late are worthless. Good decisions made quickly usually work better than perfect decisions made slowly. The stalking training had introduced Sarah to entirely new categories of physical and mental challenge. Moving across varied terrain while remaining undetected required skills that had no equivalent in intelligence work. Every movement had to be calculated not just for efficiency, but for concealment, considering factors like light conditions, background terrain, and potential observation positions. Had started with basic concealment techniques, teaching Sarah how to use natural terrain features and vegetation to break up her silhouette and movement patterns. The concept seemed straightforward in theory, but practical application revealed layers of complexity that required constant practice and refinement. "Concealment isn't about being invisible," explained while demonstrating proper movement techniques. "It's about being uninteresting. The human eye is drawn to movement, contrast, and patterns that don't belong in the natural environment. Your job is to avoid creating any of those things." The hours spent crawling across training areas had built both Sarah's physical conditioning and her understanding of fieldcraft principles that would be essential during Scout Sniper School. Every exercise revealed new aspects of terrain reading, camouflage application, and movement discipline that would be evaluated during the actual training program. Psychological preparation had required Sarah to confront aspects of military service that her intelligence career had largely shielded her from. The possibility of taking human life in direct combat was an abstract concept for most intelligence officers, but it would be a concrete reality for a scout sniper. Had approached this topic with characteristic directness, forcing Sarah to examine her own attitudes and limitations honestly. "Ma'am, there's no shame in discovering that you can't pull the trigger on another human being," he had said during one of their discussions about combat psychology. "But you need to know that about yourself before you get to school, not during your final evaluation." Sarah had spent considerable time thinking about this aspect of her potential new role. Her intelligence work had certainly contributed to combat operations that resulted in enemy casualties, but always at a distance that provided psychological buffer. The prospect of viewing an enemy through a rifle scope and making the conscious decision to end that person's life was something entirely different. The technical aspects of sniper training had appealed to Sarah's analytical nature while introducing her to equipment and techniques far more sophisticated than anything she had encountered in intelligence work. Modern sniper systems were marvels of precision engineering, with rifle scopes that could calculate ballistic solutions automatically, and equipment that provided target distances accurate to within a few yards at extreme ranges. Had introduced her to the mathematics of long-range shooting, explaining how environmental factors like wind speed, temperature, humidity, and even the rotation of the Earth could affect bullet trajectory over long distances. The calculations involved were complex enough to require dedicated computers, but Sarah had insisted on learning the manual methods as well, understanding that technology could fail at critical moments. "Ma'am, the fancy equipment is great when it works, but you need to be able to make these shots with iron sights and Kentucky windage if necessary," had explained while teaching her manual range estimation techniques. "The enemy gets a vote in how your equipment performs, and they're usually voting for it to fail at the worst possible time." The integration of her intelligence background with sniper techniques had begun to reveal possibilities that neither Sarah nor had initially anticipated. Sarah's ability to read terrain from a tactical perspective, combined with her understanding of enemy behavioral patterns, provided insights into target identification and threat assessment that impressed her mentor. "Ma'am, you're seeing things that most infantry soldiers miss," had observed during a complex observation exercise. "You're not just looking at individual targets. You're analyzing the entire situation and identifying the key players based on their behavior and positioning." This analytical approach had led to discussions about how intelligence techniques could enhance traditional sniper tactics. Sarah had begun developing what she called behavioral targeting, identifying high-value targets not just by their equipment or positioning, but by their interactions with other personnel and their decision-making patterns. The physical conditioning program had gradually transformed Sarah's body into something capable of meeting the demands of scout sniper training. The early morning runs that had initially left her exhausted became routine warm-ups. The weighted pack marches that had seemed impossible during her first attempts became standard training exercises that she could complete while maintaining tactical awareness of her surroundings. Had progressively increased the difficulty of her conditioning program, adding elements like rope climbing, obstacle course navigation, and extended field exercises that simulated the prolonged physical stress she would face during actual training. Each new challenge had initially seemed impossible, but Sarah had discovered reserves of physical and mental toughness that she hadn't known she possessed. "Ma'am, the body can do a lot more than the mind thinks it can," had told her during a particularly grueling exercise. "The trick is teaching your mind to shut up and let your body work." The mental conditioning had proven equally important as the physical preparation, had introduced Sarah to meditation and breathing techniques used by military snipers to maintain calm and focus during high-stress situations. The ability to control her physiological responses to stress would be essential during Scout Sniper School, where candidates were deliberately placed under psychological pressure designed to simulate combat conditions. Range time had become Sarah's favorite part of the training program, providing immediate feedback on her progress and allowing her to refine the precision shooting skills that would be fundamental to her success. Had gradually increased the distances and difficulty of her shooting challenges, building her confidence while identifying areas that still required improvement. "Ma'am, you're developing a natural feel for the rifle," had commented during a particularly successful range session. "That's something that can't be taught. You either have it or you don't, and you definitely have it." The precision shooting skills had reached levels that surprised even Sarah herself. Shots that had seemed impossible during her first months of training were becoming routine achievements. The mathematical concepts of ballistic calculation had become intuitive, and she could estimate ranges and wind conditions with increasing accuracy. Navigation and terrain reading skills had built on Sarah's existing analytical abilities while introducing practical fieldcraft techniques that would be essential during Scout Sniper School. Had taught her to read maps not just for information, but for tactical opportunities, identifying natural concealment positions and approach routes that would be invisible to untrained observers. "Ma'am, the terrain is your best friend and your worst enemy," had explained while teaching advanced navigation techniques. "Learn to read it correctly, and it will hide you from the enemy and reveal their positions to you. Read it wrong, and it will expose you while hiding them." The camouflage and concealment training had revealed artistic aspects of military fieldcraft that appealed to Sarah's creative problem-solving abilities. Creating effective camouflage required understanding of color theory, pattern recognition, and environmental psychology that went far beyond simply wearing appropriate clothing. Had introduced her to advanced techniques like decoy positioning, false signature creation, and psychological misdirection that turned concealment into an active tactical capability rather than simply a passive defense measure. These techniques would be essential during the stalking phases of Scout Sniper School, where candidates were required to approach within striking distance of trained observers without being detected. As Sarah's training program progressed, word of her preparation had begun to circulate throughout the battalion. Some soldiers expressed skepticism about an intelligence officer attempting to cross-train into such a demanding specialty, while others showed curiosity about whether her analytical background might provide advantages in areas like target identification and tactical assessment. Major had begun stopping by her training sessions periodically, observing her progress and asking questions about how her preparation was advancing. His initial skepticism had gradually given way to genuine interest in whether her unconventional background might indeed provide unique capabilities. "Captain, I have to admit I didn't think you'd last through the first month of training," had told her during one of his observation visits. "But tells me you're showing real potential, and I can see the physical transformation myself." The social dynamics of her preparation had required careful navigation. Sarah had needed to balance her training requirements with her ongoing intelligence duties, maintaining her performance in her primary role while dedicating enormous amounts of personal time to scout sniper preparation. Her colleagues in the intelligence section had initially viewed her training as an interesting hobby, but they had gradually begun to understand the serious commitment she was making. Lieutenant Williams, one of Sarah's fellow intelligence officers, had expressed concerns about the wisdom of her career decision during a conversation in the intelligence center. "Sarah, you've got a great career path ahead of you in intelligence work. Why risk throwing all of that away for something that has such a high failure rate?" Sarah had considered the question carefully before responding. "Because the current approach to countering enemy snipers isn't working, and I think my background might contribute to developing better solutions. If I fail at Scout Sniper School, I can return to intelligence work with a better understanding of field operations. If I succeed, I might be able to save lives that we're currently losing." The conversation had highlighted the professional risks Sarah was taking with her career decision. Military specialties were typically career-long commitments, and officers who attempted to cross-train into significantly different fields often found themselves viewed as unfocused or uncommitted to their original specialty. Had addressed this concern during one of their training discussions, providing perspective from someone who had observed numerous soldiers attempt similar career transitions. "Ma'am, the military needs people who can think outside traditional specialty boundaries," he had told her. "Your intelligence background is going to make you a different kind of sniper than someone who came up through the infantry, but different doesn't necessarily mean worse. It might mean better if you can learn to integrate your analytical skills with traditional sniper techniques." The technical integration of intelligence techniques with sniper training had begun to produce insights that neither Sarah nor had anticipated. Sarah's understanding of enemy communications, patterns, and behavioral analysis had led to new approaches for identifying high-value targets and predicting enemy movement patterns. During one training exercise, Sarah had successfully identified an enemy commander based on his communications behavior and positioning relative to other personnel, rather than relying on traditional indicators like rank insignia or equipment. This capability had impressed and suggested possibilities for enhanced target identification techniques. "Ma'am, you're developing capabilities that go beyond traditional sniper training," had observed. "You're not just learning to hit targets, you're learning to identify which targets matter most and when they're most vulnerable." As her training program entered its final phase, Sarah could feel the fundamental changes that the preparation had created in both her physical capabilities and her mental approach to military operations. The analytical intelligence officer who had started the program 6 months earlier had been transformed into someone capable of operating independently in hostile territory while maintaining the precision thinking that would be essential for complex target engagement. The confidence building had been gradual but unmistakable. Challenges that had seemed impossible during early training sessions had become routine accomplishments. Sarah had learned to trust her physical conditioning, her marksmanship skills, and her tactical judgment in ways that would be essential during Scout Sniper School. Had begun expressing optimism about her chances for success, something he had been careful to avoid during the early stages of her preparation. "Ma'am, I think you're ready for the real thing," he had told her during their final preparation session. "You've got the physical conditioning, the technical skills, and the mental discipline. Most importantly, you've got something to prove, and that motivation can carry you through situations where pure ability isn't enough." The night before her departure for Scout Sniper School, Sarah had spent time reviewing her intelligence reports one final time, knowing that it might be months before she returned to that work. The enemy sniper threat that had motivated her initial request for cross-training remained active, with American casualties continuing. The bus ride to the Scout Sniper School at Marine Corps Base felt like a journey into an unknown world. Sarah stared out the window at the Virginia countryside, watching familiar military installations give way to the specialized training facilities where she would spend the next several months discovering whether her 6 months of preparation had been sufficient. The other candidates on the bus represented the elite of their respective units, soldiers and Marines who had been specifically selected for sniper training based on their demonstrated excellence in combat operations. Sarah found herself analyzing her fellow candidates with the same systematic approach she had always applied to intelligence problems. Most were infantry soldiers in their early to mid-20s, with the lean, confident bearing that came from successful combat experience. Their conversations revealed extensive fieldwork backgrounds and familiarity with the demands they were about to face. Several were returning candidates who had failed previous attempts and were making second or third tries at completing the program. The physical appearance of her competition was both intimidating and educational. These were soldiers who had been preparing for sniper training throughout their military careers, with the specialized knowledge and conditioning that came from years of infantry service. Sarah understood that her analytical background would need to prove itself quickly in an environment where practical fieldcraft skills were the primary measure of competence. Master Sergeant Collins conducted the initial briefing with the matter-of-fact delivery of someone who had seen hundreds of motivated candidates discover the reality of what they had volunteered for. He was a compact, weathered Marine in his late 30s whose reputation for uncompromising standards was legendary throughout the sniper community. His presentation covered the basic structure of the program, the evaluation criteria, and the statistical reality that approximately 70% of candidates would not complete training successfully. Ladies, and you are here because your commanding officers believe you have the potential to become scout snipers, Collins began, his voice carrying the authority that came from years of successful field operations. I am here to determine whether they are correct. Over the next 14 weeks, you will be evaluated on every aspect of your character, your intelligence, your physical capabilities, and your capacity to perform under stress. Some of you will discover that you are not suited for this work, and you will be sent back to your units with my recommendation that they find different ways to utilize your talents. Sarah listened carefully, understanding that Collins was establishing both the standards and the mindset that would define the next several months. There would be no participation awards or credit for good intentions. Success would be measured by demonstrated competence in specific, measurable skills under increasingly demanding conditions. The first week focused primarily on marksmanship fundamentals, allowing the instructors to assess each candidate's basic shooting skills and identify areas requiring immediate remediation. Sarah found herself grouped with soldiers whose precision shooting abilities varied considerably, from expert marksmen to infantry soldiers with solid but unexceptional rifle skills. The instructors approached each candidate individually, building customized training programs based on identified strengths and weaknesses. Sergeant Williams, Sarah's primary marksmanship instructor, had initially expressed skepticism about her unconventional background, but quickly recognized her natural aptitude for precision shooting. The months of training with had established solid fundamentals that needed only minor refinement rather than complete reconstruction. Ma'am, your shooting mechanics are solid, but I need to see how you perform under pressure, Williams told her during their third range session. Range shooting with unlimited time is completely different from engaging targets under tactical conditions with multiple stressors affecting your performance. The pressure testing began immediately, with shooting exercises conducted under physical exhaustion, time constraints, and psychological stress designed to simulate combat conditions. Sarah discovered that her intelligence training had provided unexpected advantages in areas like stress management and rapid decision-making under pressure. While other candidates struggled with the mental aspects of pressure shooting, Sarah found that she could maintain analytical focus even when her body was pushed to its physical limits. The stalking phase of training introduced challenges that went far beyond anything Sarah had experienced during her preparation with. The instructors had designed scenarios that required candidates to approach within striking distance of trained observers, while carrying full equipment loads across varied terrain that offered minimal natural concealment. The first stalking exercise was a humbling experience for most candidates, including Sarah. The requirement to move several hundred yards across relatively open terrain without being detected by experienced observers proved far more difficult than theoretical understanding had suggested. Sarah's first attempt resulted in detection within the first hour, forcing her to confront the gap between classroom knowledge and practical application. Ma'am, you're thinking too much and moving too little, Sergeant Martinez observed during the post-exercise critique. Stalking is about patience and discipline, not about finding the perfect solution. Pick a good route, commit to it completely, and execute it with absolute attention to detail. The feedback was consistent with what had told her during training. but the practical application under evaluation conditions revealed new layers of complexity. Every movement had to be calculated not just for concealment, but for efficiency, considering the time constraints that were part of every exercise. Sarah had to learn to balance speed with stealth in ways that required constant adjustment based on terrain conditions and observer positioning. Physical training at the school exceeded even the demanding preparation program that it designed. Daily runs, load-bearing exercises, and combat simulation drills were conducted at intensity levels that pushed every candidate to their physical limits. Sarah discovered that her 6 months of preparation had provided an adequate foundation, but that she would need to continue building her conditioning throughout the program. The academic portion of the training covered subjects ranging from advanced ballistics calculations to target identification techniques that went far beyond basic marksmanship. Sarah's analytical background provided significant advantages in areas like range estimation, environmental factor assessment, and tactical situation analysis. She could process complex ballistic calculations more quickly than most of her fellow candidates and demonstrated superior ability to identify target priorities based on behavioral observation. Captain shows exceptional aptitude for the analytical aspects of sniper operations, her academic instructor, Captain, noted in his weekly evaluation. Her intelligence background provides her with frameworks for target assessment and tactical analysis that exceed what we typically see from infantry-trained candidates. However, the practical application of academic knowledge under field conditions proved more challenging than Sarah had anticipated. Calculating ballistic solutions while lying prone in uncomfortable positions, dealing with equipment malfunctions, and managing the psychological pressure of being evaluated simultaneously was significantly different from classroom exercises. The urban operations training introduced Sarah to environments that were completely outside her previous experience. Moving through built-up areas while maintaining concealment required skills that had no equivalent in traditional intelligence work. The three-dimensional nature of urban terrain, with multiple levels of observation positions and complex approach routes, demanded tactical thinking that challenged even her analytical capabilities. Sargent, the urban operations instructor, had served multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan and brought hard-earned experience to his teaching methods. He pushed candidates through scenarios based on actual combat situations, requiring them to adapt their techniques to the specific demands of urban warfare. "Ma'am, urban operations are all about seeing the environment differently than everyone else sees it," explained while demonstrating concealment techniques in a mock city environment. "Most people look at buildings and see walls, windows, and doors. Snipers have to see concealment opportunities, fields of fire, and escape routes that aren't obvious to untrained observers." The urban training revealed both Sarah's strengths and limitations. Her ability to analyze complex spatial relationships and identify patterns served her well in target identification and route planning. However, the physical demands of moving through urban terrain while carrying full equipment loads challenged her conditioning in ways that open country operations did not. Field exercises became increasingly complex as the training progressed, with scenarios that required candidates to operate independently for extended periods while maintaining mission focus under physically and psychologically demanding conditions. Sarah found herself spending days at a time in field positions, practicing observation techniques and target engagement procedures that tested every aspect of her preparation. The isolation aspects of field training proved particularly challenging for someone accustomed to the collaborative environment of intelligence work. Snipers often operated alone or in very small teams for extended periods, requiring self-reliance and psychological resilience that went beyond normal military training. Sarah had to learn to maintain focus and decision-making capability during long periods without external input or validation. "Ma'am, you need to learn to trust your own judgment completely," Master Sergeant Collins told her during a field exercise critique. "In the field, you won't have anyone to consult with or verify your decisions. You'll see something, you'll assess it, you'll act on it, and you'll live with the consequences. That requires a level of confidence and self-reliance that some people never develop." The psychological training addressed aspects of sniper operations that Sarah had understood intellectually, but had never confronted personally. The possibility of taking human life in direct combat was approached systematically, with instructors who had extensive combat experience providing frameworks for managing the mental and emotional aspects of lethal action. The decision to take a life is never easy, and it shouldn't be, Collins explained during one of these discussions. What we're teaching you is how to make that decision quickly and accurately when the tactical situation requires it, and how to live with yourself afterward. Sarah found these discussions both necessary and disturbing. Her intelligence work had certainly contributed to combat operations with lethal outcomes, but always at a psychological distance that provided emotional buffer. The prospect of viewing a human target through a rifle scope and making the conscious decision to pull the trigger was something entirely different. The weapons training expanded far beyond basic marksmanship to include advanced techniques for long-range precision shooting, target detection, and equipment maintenance under field conditions. Sarah learned to operate rifle systems that were far more sophisticated than anything she had encountered during her preparation, with computerized ballistic calculators and advanced optical systems that could engage targets accurately at distances exceeding 1,000 yards. However, the instructors emphasized that technology was only as reliable as the operator's fundamental skills. Equipment could malfunction, environmental conditions could degrade electronic systems, and tactical situations might require engagement methods that bypassed technological solutions entirely. Ma'am, all this fancy equipment is great when it works, but you need to be able to make these shots with iron sights and manual calculations if necessary, Sergeant Williams reminded her during advanced weapons training. The enemy doesn't care how sophisticated your equipment is, and they're actively trying to degrade your technological advantages. The integration training brought together all the individual skills that had been taught separately, requiring candidates to demonstrate competence in complete mission scenarios that included planning, execution, and post-mission analysis. These exercises revealed how well each candidate could synthesize the various aspects of sniper training into coherent operational capability. Sarah's performance during integration exercises demonstrated the advantages that her intelligence background provided in areas like mission planning and tactical analysis. She could develop comprehensive operational plans that accounted for factors that other candidates might overlook, and she showed superior ability to adapt those plans based on changing conditions during execution. Captain demonstrates exceptional capability in mission planning and tactical adaptation, her integration instructor noted. Her analytical background allows her to process complex scenarios more quickly and completely than most candidates, though she sometimes needs to be reminded to trust her instincts rather than overanalyzing situations that require immediate action. The competition among candidates had intensified as the program progressed, and the weaker performers were eliminated. Sarah found herself part of a diminishing group of soldiers who had demonstrated the competence and resilience necessary to continue training. The camaraderie that developed among successful candidates was different from anything she had experienced in intelligence work, based on shared hardship and mutual respect for demonstrated competence. Private First Class Johnson, one of the youngest candidates, had emerged as both a strong performer and an informal leader among the remaining trainees. His infantry background and natural leadership abilities had earned him respect from instructors and fellow candidates alike. Sarah had developed a working relationship with him that combined her analytical strengths with his tactical intuition. "Ma'am, you see things that the rest of us miss," Johnson told her during a break between exercises. "Your intelligence background gives you a different perspective on targets and tactical situations, but sometimes you need to trust your gut instead of trying to analyze everything to death." The observation was consistent with feedback Sarah had received from multiple instructors. Her analytical approach provided significant advantages in many aspects of sniper training, but it could also create hesitation in situations that required immediate action based on incomplete information. Stress testing during the latter phases of training pushed candidates to their physical and psychological limits through sleep deprivation, extended field operations, and scenarios designed to create maximum pressure on decision-making processes. Sarah discovered that her months of preparation had developed not just physical conditioning but mental resilience that served her well during these challenging phases. The final weeks of training focused on comprehensive evaluations that tested every aspect of sniper capability under realistic conditions. Candidates were required to demonstrate competence in long-range marksmanship, stalking techniques, observation procedures, and tactical decision-making through scenarios that simulated actual combat operations. Sarah's final evaluations reflected both her unique strengths and the areas where her unconventional background had required additional effort to reach required standards. Her analytical capabilities and precision shooting skills had consistently exceeded expectations, while her stalking techniques and physical endurance had required continuous improvement throughout the program. Captain has demonstrated exceptional analytical capability and superior marksmanship skills, Master Sergeant Collins wrote in his final assessment. Her intelligence background provides her with target identification and tactical analysis capabilities that exceed what we typically see in scout sniper candidates. She has successfully adapted to the physical and psychological demands of sniper training while maintaining the analytical perspective that represents her primary operational advantage. The graduation ceremony was a subdued affair, reflecting the serious nature of the training that had been completed rather than celebrating personal achievement. Of the original 42 candidates who had begun the program, 18 had successfully completed all requirements and earned the designation of Scout Sniper. Sarah had not only completed the training, but had distinguished herself in several key areas that would define her effectiveness in operational assignments. As Sarah received her certificate and Scout Sniper designation, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. The intelligence officer who had requested cross-training 6 months earlier had been transformed into someone capable of operating independently in hostile territory while maintaining the analytical perspective that would be essential for the complex targeting problems she would face in the field. The conversation with Master Sergeant Collins after the ceremony provided insight into how her unique background might be utilized in operational assignments. Captain, your combination of intelligence training and sniper qualification creates possibilities that we haven't fully explored, Collins told her. You understand enemy behavioral patterns and tactical decision-making in ways that most snipers don't, and you can analyze complex situations while maintaining the precision shooting capability to act on that analysis. The implications of this combination were beginning to become clear to Sarah as she prepared to return to her unit. She was no longer simply an intelligence officer or a scout sniper, but something new that the morning briefing at Forward Operating Base Falcon felt different this time. Sarah sat at the same conference table where she had once analyzed enemy sniper threats from the safety of an air-conditioned intelligence center. But now, she wore the distinctive insignia of a qualified scout sniper alongside her intelligence officer credentials. The PowerPoint slides showing recent enemy sniper activity no longer represented abstract tactical problems to be analyzed, but operational challenges that she would address personally in the field. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez studied the latest casualty reports with the grim expression that had become familiar over the past several months. The enemy sniper campaign had intensified during Sarah's time at Scout Sniper School, with American losses mounting despite continued efforts to counter the threat using conventional tactics. The intelligence picture showed a sophisticated enemy operation that had adapted to every countermeasure the conventional forces had attempted. Captain, I trust your training has prepared you for what we're facing out there, Martinez said, as Sarah took her seat at the briefing table. The situation has deteriorated significantly since you left for sniper school. We're losing soldiers at a rate that's becoming unsustainable, and the enemy seems to anticipate every move our conventional counter-sniper teams make. Sarah opened her tactical folder and reviewed the intelligence summaries that had accumulated during her absence. The patterns that had concerned her months earlier had evolved into something far more dangerous and sophisticated. Enemy snipers were now operating in coordinated teams, using communication networks that allowed them to share intelligence and coordinate attacks across broad geographic areas. Sir, I can see that the threat has become more systematic, Sarah responded, her voice carrying the confidence that came from months of demanding training. What I'm seeing here suggests that we're not dealing with individual marksmen anymore, but with an organized sniper network that's using intelligence-gathering techniques to stay ahead of our countermeasures. Major leaned forward, his expression reflecting both skepticism and hope. What makes you think your approach will be more effective than what we've already tried? The question was fair, and Sarah had been preparing for it throughout her journey back from Scout Sniper School. Sir, Conventional counter-sniper tactics assume that we're hunting individual shooters who are operating independently. But my analysis suggests we're dealing with a network that's using intelligence techniques to gather information about our patterns and procedures. To counter that effectively, we need someone who can think like an intelligence analyst while operating like a sniper. Sarah connected her laptop to the projection system and displayed her preliminary assessment of the enemy sniper network. The analysis combined traditional intelligence methodologies with tactical insights that she had developed during sniper training, creating a comprehensive picture of how the enemy operation functioned. The enemy isn't just taking targets of opportunity, she explained, highlighting key areas on the tactical map. They're conducting systematic reconnaissance of our patrol routes, timing our movements, and identifying our most predictable behaviors. They know when our supply convoys move, when our patrols change shifts, and when our personnel are most vulnerable. The briefing room fell silent as the implications of Sarah's analysis became clear. The enemy sniper network wasn't simply a collection of individual marksmen, but an organized intelligence operation that happened to use precision shooting as its primary tactical method. Countering it would require more than just better marksmanship or improved protective measures. "What are you recommending, Captain?" Martinez asked. Sarah had spent the entire flight back from developing her operational proposal, understanding that she would have one opportunity to convince her superiors that her unique combination of skills could make a difference. "Sir, I recommend that we flip the intelligence equation. Instead of reacting to enemy sniper attacks, we need to gather intelligence on their network and begin hunting them systematically." She clicked to her next slide, which outlined a comprehensive counterintelligence operation designed specifically to target the enemy sniper network. "I'm proposing a combination of traditional intelligence gathering with direct action missions. We identify their observation posts, map their communication networks, learn their operational patterns, and then eliminate them using precision techniques that they won't anticipate." Captain, the current intelligence officer who had been covering Sarah's duties during her training, raised his hand. "How do you propose to gather intelligence on targets that have successfully avoided our surveillance assets for months?" Sarah had anticipated this question as well. "By using the same techniques they're using against us, but with better training and equipment. I'll establish observation posts in areas where they're likely to operate, conduct extended surveillance operations to identify their patterns, and use my analytical background to develop comprehensive profiles of individual operators within their network." The proposal was ambitious, requiring resources and operational flexibility that went beyond normal intelligence procedures. Sarah would need to operate independently for extended periods, often without direct support or communication with base operations. The risks were substantial, but so was the potential for significantly degrading the enemy sniper threat. Major Stevens, the operations officer, looked up from his notes. "Captain, what you're describing sounds more like a special operations mission than a conventional counter-sniper operation. Do you really think you can operate alone in hostile territory for the extended periods this would require?" Sarah understood that Stevens was questioning not just her tactical proposal, but her personal capability to execute such demanding operations. "Sir, my sniper training specifically prepared me for independent operations under hostile conditions. Combined with my intelligence background, I believe I can gather information that conventional reconnaissance assets can't access and act on that information in ways that conventional forces can't." The discussion continued for nearly an hour, with various officers raising practical concerns about logistics, communication, and operational security. Sarah responded to each question with detailed answers that demonstrated both her thorough preparation and her realistic understanding of the challenges involved. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez finally called for a decision. "Captain, I'm willing to authorize a trial operation based on your proposal. However, I want clearly defined objectives, specific success criteria, and regular reporting requirements. This isn't a hunting expedition. It's a targeted intelligence operation with direct action components." Sarah felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. After months of preparation and training, she would finally have the opportunity to test her theories under operational conditions. "Understood, sir. I'll have detailed operational plans ready for your review by tomorrow morning." The next several days were spent in intensive mission planning that brought together Sarah's intelligence expertise with the tactical requirements of field operations. She worked closely with Sergeant First Class, who would provide communications support and emergency backup, and with the base intelligence staff to develop comprehensive operational parameters. The target area was a mountainous region approximately 20 kilometers north of the base, where recent enemy sniper activity suggested the presence of multiple operators working in coordination. Intelligence reports indicated that the area contained natural observation positions that would allow enemy snipers to monitor American patrol routes while maintaining concealment from conventional surveillance methods. Sarah's mission planning revealed the complexity of combining intelligence gathering with direct action operations. She would need to establish observation posts that allowed her to monitor enemy activity while remaining undetected herself, analyze the information she gathered to identify high-value targets, and then engage those targets using precision shooting techniques that would disrupt the entire network rather than simply eliminating individual operators. The equipment preparation required careful balance between the tools needed for extended surveillance operations and the weapon systems necessary for precision engagement at long ranges. Sarah would carry advanced observation equipment, satellite communication systems, and a sophisticated sniper rifle system capable of accurate engagement at distances exceeding 1,000 meters. "Ma'am, you're going to be carrying a lot of equipment for someone who needs to remain mobile and concealed," observed during equipment preparation. "Make sure you've prioritized everything correctly, because you won't be able to carry anything that isn't absolutely essential." The physical preparation required Sarah to adapt her conditioning program to the specific demands of the mission she would be undertaking. Extended periods of motionless observation, rapid movement across difficult terrain, and precision shooting under field conditions would test every aspect of her training in ways that school exercises could not duplicate. The night before her insertion, Sarah spent time reviewing the intelligence picture one final time, understanding that her success would depend on her ability to see patterns and opportunities that conventional analysis had missed. The enemy sniper network had remained effective because it operated outside the assumptions that guided normal counter-sniper operations. "The key is thinking like they think while maintaining advantages they don't have," Sarah told herself while studying aerial photographs of her operational area. "They know our procedures and our limitations, but they don't know that someone with my background is coming after them." The insertion was conducted before dawn, using a helicopter approach that minimized the possibility of enemy observation. Sarah was dropped at a landing zone approximately 5 kilometers from her target area, requiring her to move cross-country while carrying full equipment and maintaining operational security. The movement to her initial observation position took most of the morning, with Sarah carefully navigating terrain that provided concealment while avoiding areas where enemy observers might be positioned. Every aspect of her scout sniper training came into play as she moved across ground that could hide both opportunities and threats. The first observation position was established on that provided excellent visibility over the valley, where enemy activity had been reported. Sarah settled into a carefully camouflaged position that would allow her to maintain surveillance for extended periods while remaining undetected by anyone moving through the area below. The initial hours of observation revealed the complexity of the intelligence picture that could only be gathered through direct field surveillance. Sarah could see patrol routes, supply trails, and communication patterns that were invisible from aerial photography or electronic surveillance. The enemy had chosen their operational area carefully, using natural terrain features to provide both concealment and tactical advantage. By the second day of observation, Sarah had begun to identify patterns in the movement and positioning that suggested organized activity rather than random travel. Individuals were using specific routes at consistent times, suggesting coordination and planning that confirmed her analysis of an organized network rather than independent operators. "Base, this is Overwatch. I'm seeing systematic activity that confirms network operations," Sarah reported during her scheduled communication window. "Recommend extending observation period to develop comprehensive target analysis." The extended surveillance revealed the sophistication of the enemy operation in ways that surprised even Sarah. The network included not just snipers, but spotters, communications personnel, and logistical support that allowed them to maintain operations across a broad geographic area. They were using techniques that demonstrated professional training and access to advanced equipment. On the fourth day, Sarah identified what appeared to be a senior leader within the network, an individual whose movement patterns and interaction with other personnel suggested command responsibility. This target represented an opportunity to significantly disrupt the network's operations rather than simply eliminating individual shooters. The target identification required Sarah to integrate all aspects of her training, using intelligence techniques to analyze behavioral patterns while employing sniper skills to assess engagement opportunities. The individual was using movement patterns that suggested awareness of surveillance threats, but his command responsibilities required him to maintain contact with subordinate elements in ways that created predictable vulnerabilities. Base, I have identified a high-value target whose elimination would significantly degrade network operations, Sarah reported, requesting permission to engage. The authorization came after several hours of consultation with higher headquarters, understanding that Sarah's engagement would signal the beginning of active operations against the network and would likely prompt countermeasures that could affect the broader tactical situation. The engagement preparation required Sarah to position herself at a location that provided both a clear shot at the target and an escape route that would allow her to evade the response that would certainly follow. The shot distance was approximately 800 meters, well within her capabilities, but challenging enough to require careful calculation of environmental factors. The target appeared at the anticipated time and location, moving with several other individuals along a route that Sarah had been observing for 2 days. Through her rifle scope, she could see that he was carrying communication equipment and appeared to be directing the movement of his companions. Sarah controlled her breathing and carefully calculated the ballistic solution for the engagement, accounting for wind conditions, temperature, and the slight upward angle of the shot. Her finger found the trigger as she aligned the crosshairs with the target, knowing that the next few seconds would determine whether months of training and preparation had been worthwhile. The shot broke cleanly, and Sarah immediately observed the impact through her scope before beginning her withdrawal from the firing position. The target had been eliminated with a single precision shot that demonstrated both the accuracy of her marksmanship and the effectiveness of her target analysis. The response was immediate and intense, with enemy personnel moving quickly to secure the area and search for the source of the shot. Sarah's withdrawal plan had anticipated this reaction, and she was able to move away from her firing position before search teams could narrow their focus to her location. Base, this is Overwatch. Target eliminated successfully. Beginning withdrawal to alternate position, Sarah reported while moving rapidly across terrain that would mask her movement from potential observers. The next several hours tested every aspect of Sarah's training as enemy elements attempted to locate and engage her position. Her knowledge of the terrain, combined with advanced concealment techniques, allowed her to remain undetected while moving to a new observation position several kilometers away. The enemy response confirmed the importance of the target she had eliminated and validated her analysis of the network's organization. Radio intercepts suggested that her action had created significant disruption within the enemy organization, with elements being recalled from planned operations to search for the sniper who had eliminated their leader. From her new position, Sarah continued surveillance operations that revealed the impact of her engagement on enemy operations. The systematic activities she had observed during previous days had been replaced by reactive searches and defensive positioning that suggested the network's operational capability had been significantly degraded. Base, I'm observing significant changes in enemy activity patterns that suggest major disruption of their operations, Sarah reported. Recommend continuing operations to exploit the advantage created by initial engagement. The success of her first mission led to authorization for continued operations that would systematically target the remaining elements of the sniper network. Sarah had proven that her combination of intelligence expertise and precision shooting capability could address threats that conventional operations had been unable to counter effectively. Over the following weeks, Sarah conducted a series of operations that methodically dismantled the enemy sniper network through targeted elimination of key personnel, combined with intelligence gathering that revealed 3 months after her first successful mission. Sarah found herself briefing senior military leaders at regional command headquarters, presenting analysis that had transformed understanding of enemy sniper operations throughout the theater. The conference room was filled with colonels and generals who had traveled from across the region to understand how a single intelligence officer turned sniper had achieved results that entire battalions had been unable to accomplish. The statistics spoke for themselves. Enemy sniper attacks in Sarah's area of operations had decreased by 87% since she had begun her systematic campaign against the network. More importantly, the intelligence she had gathered during her operations had revealed similar networks operating in other regions, allowing conventional forces to apply her techniques across a much broader geographic area. General, the theater commander, studied the operational summaries with the focused attention of someone who understood that what Sarah had accomplished represented more than just tactical success. Captain, what you've achieved challenges some fundamental assumptions about how we approach irregular warfare. I want to understand not just what you did, but how your approach can be applied more broadly. Sarah had spent weeks preparing for this briefing, understanding that it represented an opportunity to influence military doctrine in ways that could save countless lives. Her PowerPoint presentation combined detailed tactical analysis with strategic insights that demonstrated how intelligence-driven precision operations could provide alternatives to conventional approaches that often produced limited results. Sir, the key insight is that modern irregular warfare often involves enemy networks that operate more like intelligence organizations than traditional military units. Sarah began, her voice carrying the confidence that came from proven success under demanding conditions. These networks gather information systematically, analyze our patterns and procedures, and exploit our predictable behaviors. Countering them effectively requires us to operate with the same level of analytical sophistication, while maintaining tactical advantages they cannot match. She clicked to her first slide, which displayed the network analysis that had guided her operations over the past several months. The organizational chart showed connections between personnel, equipment, and operational methods that revealed the enemy sniper network as a sophisticated intelligence operation rather than a collection of individual marksmen. Traditional counter-sniper operations focus on protecting our forces from enemy shooters or attempting to engage individual snipers when they reveal themselves, Sarah continued. This approach treats the symptoms rather than addressing the underlying network that enables enemy operations. By applying intelligence techniques to identify and analyze the network structure, we can target the elements that are most critical to their operational capability. Colonel, the regional intelligence officer, leaned forward with obvious interest. Captain, how do you gather intelligence on networks that have successfully avoided our surveillance assets for extended periods? Sarah had anticipated this question, understanding that the intelligence community was particularly interested in her methods. Sir, the key is combining traditional intelligence gathering with direct field observation using sniper techniques. Enemy networks avoid our technical surveillance assets, but they cannot avoid human observation conducted by someone who understands their operational methods and can remain undetected in their operational areas. The next section of her briefing detailed the specific techniques she had developed for conducting extended surveillance operations in hostile territory. The methodology combined scout-sniper training in concealment and observation with intelligence analytical frameworks that allowed her to identify patterns and relationships that conventional surveillance would miss. The enemy networks operate under the assumption that American forces cannot conduct extended surveillance operations in areas they control, Sarah explained. This assumption creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited by someone with appropriate training and equipment. By establishing observation posts in areas where conventional forces cannot operate, I was able to gather intelligence that revealed the complete structure and operational methods of the network. Major General Richards, the Special Operations Commander, interrupted with a tactical question. Captain, what you're describing sounds like it requires someone to operate alone in hostile territory for extended periods. How do you manage the risks associated with that level of independent operation? The question addressed concerns that had been raised throughout Sarah's operational career, and she had developed comprehensive risk management procedures based on her field experience. Sir, the risks are significant, but they can be managed through careful planning, appropriate equipment, and tactical techniques that minimize exposure to enemy detection. The key is understanding that the greatest risk comes from being predictable rather than from being alone. Sarah's risk management techniques had evolved through months of field operations that had tested every aspect of her training and analytical capabilities. She had learned to read terrain not just for tactical advantage, but for subtle indicators of enemy presence that conventional training did not address. Her intelligence background provided frameworks for threat assessment that went beyond what most snipers learned during their training. The intelligence gathered through extended field operations provides tactical advantages that cannot be achieved through any other method, Sarah continued. By understanding enemy networks from direct observation rather than technical intelligence, we can predict their behavior, identify their vulnerabilities, and engage them at times and places where they are most vulnerable. The briefing continued with detailed case studies from Sarah's most successful operations, demonstrating how intelligence analysis had identified specific targets whose elimination had produced cascading effects throughout the enemy network. Each operation had been designed not just to eliminate individual enemies, but to degrade the network's overall capability through systematic targeting of key personnel. The elimination of network leaders creates disruption that extends far beyond the immediate tactical impact, Sarah explained, while displaying communication intercepts that had been gathered after her engagements. Enemy networks require coordination and communication to function effectively. When key personnel are eliminated, the network must reorganize, change communication procedures, and modify operational methods in ways that create new vulnerabilities. Generals studied the results with obvious interest. What you're showing us suggests that precision targeting based on intelligence analysis can achieve strategic effects through tactical actions. How do we scale this approach to address similar networks in other regions? This was the question Sarah had been hopping for, the one that would determine whether her individual success could contribute to broader improvements in military effectiveness. Sir, I believe the approach can be scaled through training programs that combine intelligence techniques with advanced sniper capabilities. We need personnel who can think like intelligence analysts while operating like special operations soldiers. The proposal was ambitious, requiring changes to training programs, operational doctrine, and organizational structures that would challenge traditional military specialties. Sarah understood that what she was suggesting represented a fundamental shift in how the military approached certain types of threats. Colonel Stevens, the doctrine development officer, raised his hand. Captain, what you're proposing would require significant changes to our training and organizational structures. Do you really think the benefits would justify the costs and complexity? Sarah had prepared extensively for this objection, understanding that institutional resistance to change was natural and often appropriate. Sir, the current approach to irregular warfare has produced limited results against networks that continue to adapt and evolve. The costs of developing new capabilities must be weighed against the costs of continuing to lose personnel to threats we cannot effectively counter using conventional methods. The discussion that followed revealed both the potential and the challenges associated with implementing Sarah's approach more broadly. Different officers raised concerns about training requirements, equipment costs, personnel selection criteria, and operational security procedures that would be necessary to support expanded operations. Sarah responded to each concern with detailed answers based on her field experience, demonstrating that she had not only succeeded individually, but had thought carefully about how her methods could be applied by others. Her responses reflected both tactical expertise and institutional understanding that impressed even skeptical senior officers. The most important factor in success is not the specific techniques, but the analytical mindset, Sarah emphasized during the discussion period. Personnel must be trained to see enemy networks as intelligence problems rather than just targeting problems. This requires combining traditional military skills with analytical capabilities that allow operators to understand complex organizational relationships. The psychological aspects of Sarah's work had evolved significantly since her initial deployment. The reality of taking human life through precision shooting had proven to be exactly as challenging as her instructors had warned. But her intelligence background had provided frameworks for understanding her actions within broader strategic contexts that helped her manage the emotional impact. The hardest part isn't pulling the trigger, Sarah had told during one of their communication sessions. It's making sure that every engagement serves a larger purpose than just eliminating individual enemies. When you understand how each action contributes to degrading an entire network, it becomes easier to accept the moral weight of what you're doing. The operational tempo had been demanding, requiring Sarah to maintain peak physical and mental conditioning while conducting extended field operations under stressful conditions. The combination of physical challenge and psychological pressure had tested her resilience in ways that training exercises could never duplicate. However, the results had exceeded all expectations, both in terms of tactical success and personal development. Sarah had discovered capabilities and resilience that she had never known she possessed, while developing expertise that placed her among the military's most effective specialists in irregular warfare. The briefing concluded with General's announcement that Sarah's methods would be incorporated into new training programs designed to address similar threats throughout the theater. Her individual success had demonstrated the potential for new approaches to irregular warfare that could provide significant advantages over conventional methods. Captain has proven that innovative thinking combined with exceptional individual performance can achieve results that challenge our traditional understanding of military operations, stated. I'm directing the development of training programs based on her methods, and I'm recommending her for assignment to a new unit that will specialize in intelligence-driven precision operations. The new assignment would take Sarah to the Pentagon, where she would work with senior strategists to develop doctrine and training programs based on her field experience. It represented recognition that her individual success had strategic implications that extended far beyond her particular area of operations. The transition from field operations to strategic planning would require different skills, but would allow Sarah to influence military effectiveness on a much broader scale. Her combat experience would inform policy decisions that could affect how the military approached irregular warfare for years to come. As Sarah prepared to leave the field environment where she had proven her capabilities, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from intelligence analyst to scout sniper to strategic advisor. Each phase had required her to develop new capabilities while maintaining the analytical perspective that had been central to her success. The enemy sniper network that had motivated her initial request for cross-training had been completely eliminated, with its methods and organizational structure thoroughly understood and documented. The threat that had once seemed insurmountable had been systematically dismantled through approaches that combined intelligence analysis with precision action. More importantly, Sarah had demonstrated that military personnel could successfully cross traditional specialty boundaries when operational requirements demanded new approaches. Her success had shown that analytical thinking and tactical capability could be combined in ways that produced results exceeding what either specialty could achieve independently. The statistical summary of her operations was impressive by any measure. 37 confirmed enemy eliminations, complete disruption of network operations in her assigned area, and intelligence collection that had enabled successful operations throughout the region. These achievements had been accomplished with zero friendly casualties and minimal resource expenditure compared to conventional operations. However, Sarah understood that her most important contribution had been demonstrating that unconventional approaches to military problems could produce exceptional results when properly planned and executed. Her success had validated the importance of analytical thinking in tactical operations, while proving that intelligence officers could develop combat capabilities that enhanced rather than replaced their analytical strengths. The medal ceremony conducted before her departure represented formal recognition of achievements that had already influenced military doctrine and training procedures. The Bronze Star with Valor device reflected not just individual accomplishment, but acknowledgement that Sarah had contributed to fundamental improvements in military effectiveness. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, who had initially approved her request for sniper training, spoke at the ceremony about the broader implications of her success. Captain requested permission to attempt something that had never been done before, and she succeeded in ways that exceeded our most optimistic expectations. Her achievement demonstrates that the military's greatest strength lies in our ability to adapt and evolve when faced with new challenges. As Sarah prepared for her new assignment at the Pentagon, she carried with her the knowledge that a simple request for cross-training had led to revolutionary changes in how the military approached certain types of threats. Her journey from intelligence officer to scout sniper had proven that individual initiative, properly supported and executed, could produce results that influence strategy and doctrine at the highest levels. The enemy sniper threat that had seemed so daunting 18 months earlier now appeared manageable, using the network's complete structure and capabilities. Her unique background allowed her to understand the network as an intelligence operation, while possessing the skills necessary to take direct action against its most important elements. The results exceeded everyone's expectations, including Sarah's own. American casualties from enemy sniper activity dropped dramatically as the network's capability was systematically degraded. Sarah had demonstrated that unconventional approaches to military problems could produce results that traditional methods could not achieve. The best aspects of both specialties. The enemy sniper threat that had motivated her initial training request would now be addressed by someone who could think like an intelligence analyst, while acting like a precision marksman mount despite conventional counter-sniper efforts. Looking at those casualty reports, Sarah renewed her commitment to the path she had chosen. The 6 months of preparation had been more demanding than anything she had previously experienced, but they had also revealed capabilities and resilience that she hadn't known she possessed. Tomorrow, she would begin the real test of whether an intelligence officer could become a scout sniper, and whether that transformation could contribute to saving American lives. Began the process of transforming herself from an intelligence officer into something entirely new. She had 6 months to prepare for the most challenging training in the military, and she intended to make every day count.